Today I'm going to do a video on how to remove and replace the front brake pads or disc brake pads on a 2013 Ford Escape with a 2.5 liter engine. The first thing that I did was I took a floor jack and jacked the vehicle up and placed a jack stand under the vehicle to make it safe to work on. For the next step, what you want to do is push the caliper back just a little bit so that whenever we get the caliper bolts out, we can actually get it off of the rotor a lot easier. And the best way to do that is to come in here with a screwdriver, flat blade screwdriver, come in here by the rotor and actually push on the caliper just a little bit. You can push it and you can see it going back in, and that actually gets this whole piece loosened up just enough to get it off of the rotor. There are two bolts that hold the caliper to the vehicle. One is on the top and the other one is right down here on the bottom. There's a little dust cap right here that covers each bolt. You can take a screwdriver, it's made out of plastic, just push back a little bit, and then you can reach in here and pull it out with your finger. And the bolts are down inside this rubber covering, and when we get those out, this caliper will be disconnected from the vehicle. These bolts that are holding the caliper are Allen. They have an Allen head. It's a 7mm Allen head. You can take a 7mm socket and ratchet, reach in here, put it into the bolt, and you turn it, break it loose like that. You can take your ratchet out, then you take your socket and reach in there and pull them both out. After removing the bolts, you'll notice on the outside pad there is a bracket actually holding the pad. So what you can do is you can come in here with a screwdriver. I'm trying to do this one-handed. You just gently pull this out and it'll release this spring. Do it at the bottom right down here, and then you come around here to the top of the caliper and you can gently take a screwdriver and push it back. And you can do this from the top and the bottom, and the caliper will slide off of the rotor. After removing the caliper, I usually turn it upside down and lay it up on top of the rotor assembly so that I can actually get to it to put the new pads in. The outside pad, which was right here, actually stayed on the rotor. The inside pad, it's got a little clip inside. You just take your finger and pull it out. These little wire pieces or flat metal pieces, all they do is they just hold this pad inside of the caliper itself. One thing that I did want to mention is that you probably want to do this one wheel at a time. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first one is we have to compress this caliper back into this housing right here. And if we have both wheels off and both calipers off, when we push in on this one, it's going to push the other one in the opposite direction and can actually pop the piston out of this housing. And that is something we do not want, because at that point you will be getting another caliper and having to put it on. So what we want to do is we want to push this back in to this housing. And the other reason why you only want to do these one at a time is if for any reason you don't really understand how all this goes back together, you have one on the other side that is identical to give you a blueprint of how to put everything back on the vehicle. Now, in order to push this piston back in, you can take a big pair of something like these channel locks here, which are really big, or you can purchase or rent a piston tool to push this back in. I'm going to actually take these big pliers and I'm going to slowly push this piston all the way back into this housing. This is how I took these big channel locks and just slowly pushed this back into the housing. And as you can see, the piston itself is even all the way around. So now we are ready to put our disc brake pads into this caliper assembly. Here I have my new disc brake pads. These are the ones that'll actually go inside of the piston assembly itself because of these metal tabs. These actually just slide in. These are your two outer pads, and these are the old ones. So what I like to do with these before I put them in is I have some disc brake quiet. Actually shake this really well, and then I spray paint the back sides of these new pads. You don't spray paint the inside where it contacts the rotor, just the outside. And that puts a little film of, it makes it tacky. And what it does, if you'll know, sometimes if you ever noticed your brakes will squeal a little bit when you go to stop, or you can hear them whenever you're going slow. This will actually help reduce that or eliminate it from happening. So at this time, I'm going to shake this really well. I'm going to take these outside and I'm going to spray all 4 of these so I can get ready to put them back on the vehicle. Okay, I have sprayed the disc brake quiet on the back side of these pads. You can see that it's not really like paint, but it is kind of red in color. And I'm going to let it sit there a few minutes and let it so it'll get a little tacky. And then I'm going to go and put these back in the caliper so that I can put the caliper back on the vehicle. This pad is actually the one that goes inside of the caliper itself. You'll notice there's a big hole inside this caliper assembly. These metal tabs actually push up inside that hole, and this is the way it will look when it's mounted correctly. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our outside pad and we're going to slip it right into the bracket itself. I'm going to try to do this with one hand and video with the other, and it'll sit right there just like that. Then we're going to take the caliper assembly and rotate it around and slip it onto the bracket. After you rotate the caliper around and set it onto the bracket, you have your 2 bolts, one on the top and one on the bottom here, 7mm socket. Engage them and go ahead and hand tighten these bolts. Make sure they're threaded in there properly and not cross threaded. And then take your wire clip, your spring clip on the outside of the caliper here and install it. And if you have any problems installing it, just go around to the other side of the vehicle and see how it's installed on the side that you haven't taken apart yet. It's fairly easy to do with a pair of pliers. And then go ahead and tighten these bolts. After tightening the top and the bottom bolts, take your little plastic cover and press it into the little housing there so you can keep the dust and all off of the bolt, so that the next time you have to take them off, they'll be easy to access. After you put the dust cover on the bolts, the disc brake pad installation is completed. Go around to the other side and do the same thing as you did over here. And one thing I do want to mention is before you drive the vehicle, go inside, sit down, pump the brakes a few times till you get a solid pedal, because whenever you are doing the brake job here, you actually push the caliper back, so you won't have any brakes for the first 2 or 3 pumps of the pedal. And if you just jump in the vehicle and back out, you will take a risk of not having any brakes and running into something if something just happens to be behind you. That completes the brake job on the 2013 Ford Escape. Thanks for watching.